All right, welcome to Cannabis Unfiltered with Nic Easley. Today's topic is dispensary operations. Let's start with the general overview, Nic, of dispensary and retail and cannabis during this COVID time.
Definitely some unexpected challenges for the industry. I don't think any industries or anyone was able to deal with this at first, but we had to first adapt very radically. Many states didn't know if things were going to be open. Sales started to plummet in multiple states, just in that kind of fear tactic leading up in fear times until early March or so. But many retail establishments, by being deemed essential, were able to stay open, but then quickly adapting to curbside pickup, delivery type windows, pre-order pickup, starting to change in multiple states to try to get delivery operations, which were never allowed in the past. So retail had to evolve from this large consumer experience with tablets and this wandering kind of showroom space and really educating new consumers about cannabis to how do we process upwards of 65 to 100% more retail transactions through different alternative means during the pandemic. So retail businesses have really had to evolve and adapt quickly to some of these new protocols, but knowing what's happened over the last 4, 5, 6 months compared to what the next 6 months or the next 24 months is going to look like on a retail basis, this is where many dispensaries through this evolution and adaptation are going to be able to capture significant market share that their retail locations never would have allowed in the past.
Interesting. So what are some of the operating challenges, Nic, that these guys are facing out there?
Well, you never know if you're going to get shut down by the federal government, seeing that everything's federally illegal. You also don't know if there's going to be some sort of new public health mandate that you're going to have to follow. Being able to deal with your staff and actually having physical staff present that need to do and process transactions, how to keep them safe, how to keep your customers safe, and how to actually protect your company. So some of the mandates in certain states when it comes to mask mandates or having plexiglass kind of windows or 6 feet of distancing when you used to have a POS system that had to have people on both sides of it. Or for those dispensaries, for example, that had wandering POSs, point of sale systems where they had a tablet and would wander through a store with a client or a patient. How do you do that once you have to maintain 6 feet of distance? Or how do you have consumers be able to look and smell cannabis or see samples of it in these nice little kind of display jars, but still know that anything anyone's going to be touching, going through, or order processing has touch points of people and person to person. So we were always evolving and adapting, but we didn't know exactly what COVID was right away. And many businesses went to the extremes and shut down, or let's say like a state like Massachusetts, by not allowing adult use retail sales to go on right away. You would think, well, why would one state allow that and one wouldn't? Well, all of a sudden you've got Massachusetts, the only current recreational market, because this is pre-October 9th, 2020, before Maine is going to open up for adult use, but the only place where adults 21 and older, be you from that state, from other states, other countries, could purchase adult use cannabis and products. But they were scared that tons of people would flock from these other locations and out-of-state locations, so they had to protect their own people. But then now that that's getting ramped back up, you're seeing massive sales and taxes from revenues starting in those Massachusetts dispensaries. But I think the biggest challenge that dispensaries are going to be looking at over this next kind of 6 to 12 months is how to get into the new consumer mindset of being able to easily put things in my cart online, look at a menu board, know what's in stock, what's not, and somehow guarantee some sort of delivery option, or that I can go to a dispensary, show my ID, pay, or just show my ID I've already prepaid, and pick up my products and leave safely.
So Nic, is this the new? I mean, delivery, pickup, vending machine services. Is this here to stay, or do you think this is just through COVID and we go back?
Everything's changed. Normal is dead. It's defining this new normal. So even though COVID, there might be some sort of vaccine and everything goes back to the metaphorical normal, which it won't, there's always going to be this fear underlining people and consumers and how they're making choices. And then they've gotten, as Americans, we love convenience. And some of these same conveniences we've seen utilized by Canadian retail locations as well during this pandemic. But this is going to stay. And I think that idea of store to your door mentality, why the hell is Amazon working so well? It's convenient, it's easy, you don't have to do lots of work and research. That's the same thing with some of these new dispensary operations and how they're going to actually capture that new market share. We used to really measure dispensary success based on how much parking they had, trips per day, disposable income levels, all these little maps on top of each other to determine, just like a normal retail sales model, what's going to work and where can we really have the most access to people. That's not so much the case now in some of these municipalities. If you're able to sell or do your delivery in those jurisdictions, you don't have to have people come to you anymore. You can quickly come to them. So just like certain alcohol delivery services, other things have been ramping up. Cannabis sales, have been steady even on the illicit market for nearly 100 years, it seems. And they're going to continue to get more robust. You look last month in California, for example, July 2020, over $350 million in retail sales transactions. It's pretty significant when the amount of revenue of cannabis is $350 million in a month. Much more so than most other states. So people are shifting away from a lot of illicit market. Some of these pre-order pickups, curbside, some of the vending machines, which now are allowed in multiple states, where it's easy to extend your hours of operations potentially for when consumers can actually come and shop in like a safe vestibule and still be compliant with all state laws. So I think these things are going to stay. We've seen now 3 or 4 new states that were thinking about drive-through for a while, but since they had allowed curbside pickup, since they allowed pre-order pickup, since they had allowed people to do things we'd never done, or like in Colorado allowing municipalities to enact their own delivery type licenses, which after a decade of legal sales on the medical side, we'd never been able to do. So this quick evolution into bring cannabis to the people, quickly, safely, affordably, consistently. And the companies that can do that now, there's brands getting in front of companies that they never would have gotten in front of before. People are sitting, for 8 to 12 hours a day like this, and if they can consume and bring something to them that's going to help them through a very stressful pandemic time, they're going to continue to want that even as life begins to normalize or create the new normal of our future.
Great, thanks for that, Nic. So what about folks that want to apply for a license, retail dispensary? Has the pandemic changed that process at all? Are they looking at sort of new ways of business planning, new ways of application licensing? What's the startup process for dispensaries? Are there changes there due to the pandemic?
Yeah. On the retail sales side, the golden ticket of retail is getting your retail license from your local municipality or from the state. Now, during a pandemic, you've got 50 plus million people that have been unemployed. A lot of disposable income has kind of vanished. Certain business opportunities have failed, but then you think about all these municipalities that had tourism, restaurants, hotels, tons of taxable revenue from alcohol sales in bars, which is a very high kind of tax rate. With those things closed, there's major deficits in local municipalities and state budgets, hence why 8 new states have gotten on the ballot. That's why we're seeing adult use initiatives in states we didn't think would happen for 2 to 4 more years. So there's that's happening, where all of a sudden more places want this, and that means there's going to be future licensing rounds. There's also a lot of people and companies that would have traditionally been pursuing multiple licenses. You get a license in Santa Cruz, why not try to get one in Sonoma? Why not try to get one further south, further north, or a few in San Francisco? Some people got a little scared and puckered up hard, and they're like, don't really want to deploy capital, don't want to engage the experts to help with the applications, don't want to have to sit on these long-term potential retail leases or sales options on these properties, because nearly 90% of the time, a location and a physical address with owner's consent, zoning, radius maps, everything completely perfect with that local ordinance in order to actually apply for a license. So everything's shitty. Cash flows are drying up for many companies. They don't really want to deploy all these licensing fees, application fees, expert fees, legal consultants, real estate down payments, community support and development. So I think that there's going to be less competition for many of these new licenses, which is a good thing, because in some states for, let's say 40 licenses, there's over 700 applications. You do the math, your odds aren't great, so you better use some wise people to help you do these. But I think during this COVID time, these new licenses, now's the time more than ever, because more municipalities are going to need this, want this. You can get ahead of this where there's less competition. But certain things I have seen major impacts. You think about Illinois with all of these licenses being delayed because the hired experts to review the applications couldn't actually travel and do that in person. Major delays, and then all these social equity kind of pitfalls where potentially groups were backing key men, key women to like back their social equity positions to win licenses. But also, not to name too many municipalities or violate any confidentiality agreements. I'm in a few markets right now where things have to be timed within 30 days of the application. Well, it's kind of challenging when you go from being shut down and getting fingerprints or having people travel to get, let's say, live scan fingerprints to do their background checks, police clearances, court clearances, attorney general clearances that all have to line up perfectly within this certain amount of dates. Let's say you have multiple states and multiple jurisdictions and multiple owners. They all have to coordinate all of this, and then everything gets together, and then the government shut down again, and they're not even accepting applications. And then there's the fear of not knowing. If we do submit this application and pay this application fee, which I'm currently in 3 different markets with this happening, where we pay this, we wait, by the time they open this, will certain things be valid or not? Are there grace periods and extension periods? Or if you're paying for real estate as part of that application process, and they thought they were going to take 3 months, and then all of a sudden there's some lawsuits from the groups that weren't qualified, like in New Jersey for the last medical dispensary licenses, and then you end up paying for real estate fees and leases to extend your options for 12, 13 months. If you're paying $10K a month, that's not pretty. $120,000 extra that you didn't budget, but you still have to maintain access to that property. You still have to be able to justify that you actually have entitlement to a facility with this license. Whenever they're going to award that license, you have to maintain compliance until that moment and then continued if you win. So I think this is radically impacting how retail operations have to currently licensed operators operate. Also how existing operators are going for more locations, more licenses, or how new people want to get into some of these markets. When you think about Arizona, you think about New Mexico, you think about Montana, all of these states that are changing ballot initiatives based on either medical or adult use, we're going to see some significant activity, from November forward. So it's really like the planning before that, like finding the real estate, building the team, building your financial models, coming up with that local impact, that story, and what jurisdictions are going to be valuable. Not all of these retail licenses in some places are that great, but travel patterns are changing. Being right next to an airport long-term might be nice, but then we have this other major issue currently, which I don't know if anyone's familiar with these things called bars, like where adults consume alcohol on site that they purchase, but then social use lounges, for example. We've been doing multiple applications in California and other states in preparation for this, but a dispensary that allows people to use and consume on site. Freaking phenomenal. Not so much during a pandemic. So this is another key area I think that most people are going to miss the mark on. I've already had significant investors be scared of investing into social use lounge dispensary options where people can use on site because they think people aren't going to be getting together anytime soon. But even after like the 1918, big influenza pandemic, it wasn't that long until people started going to bars again, churches again, with mandates of windows open, you name it. Like people were social beings. And long term, I think that with this hiccup of many people fearing social use dispensaries, where it's a lounge, there's poetry readings, there's concerts, like you can sit, like imagine bong service instead of bottle service. Like why does somebody pay $300 dollars for a bottle of vodka that you could buy at a liquor store for $22? Because it's got a sprinkler in it and like a pretty woman brings that to your table. So, not to say that that's where I want cannabis to go, but I definitely see a co-evolution of how bars and certain nightclubs established and how cannabis consumption lounges will in the future. So this is a key area that I think most people are going to miss the mark. Some people are going to be able to undercut this market, go for tons of those licenses and secure them, knowing that in the future we're going to ambush once people are, comfortable getting back out in public and things are safer again.
Thanks, Nic. With all that, which markets do you like for dispensary and retail now? Which states do you prefer? And which ones would you stay out of?
I'm a disabled vet. I'm all about helping veterans, medical patients get access to cannabis. But then when you're looking at 10 to 11 jurisdictions doing adult use sales and what the average spend is, basket size, and how many out-of-state people are coming to these, I of course love adult use markets. Medical markets, many of them, they're fantastic in the beginning. It's how you start. It's you get your foot in the market and you do the right thing. But that hold period, let's say like in Iowa or a Virginia or a Texas, which has a very limited medical market, very limited qualifying conditions, hard to just be like, my wrist hurts and go get, a medical card and be able to buy a couple ounces of cannabis in a state that if you do that normally, you'd be, arrested and have a tarnished record. So big markets that are up and coming, Massachusetts with the delivery licenses is going to be fantastic. Maine is starting on October 9th for adult use sales. And, Governor LePage, like everyone knows, was an asshole years and years ago that really prevented them from being first to market on the Eastern Seaboard, really setting a positive example for adult use cannabis sales, which they will once the program starts. Multiple lawsuits for like the residency requirements of out-of-state, in-state. So I think Maine, even though it's 1 million people, vacation land, is going to be nice to see some of those new sales there. Nevada, like a market that we just saw going like this, that then, because tourism like really died out for a little while, that'll be a market that ramps back up. I think there'll be some distressed opportunities there. Like I said, multiple jurisdictions in California where tons of the cities, it's not even legal to grow or sell cannabis or allow retail sales, like for dispensaries. I think there's going to be more and more municipalities in the legal states, even like states that are well established, like Colorado, Oregon, Washington, that are going to be allowing more activity just to generate more tax revenue and jobs. Because if you don't have a store there, doesn't mean that cannabis sales aren't happening in their towns. Why not tax it, regulate it, make it safer? So yeah, the big ones that I'm really thinking, and then the key market that's going to explode towards the end of this year, which already is the adult use market in Illinois. You think Illinois, no offense to Illinois, some of my family's from there, but like place, it's flat, kind of sucks. Winters are horrible. All of their neighboring states don't allow adult use cannabis, but then Illinois does, and social use consumption lounges. These next 75 dispensary licenses awarded to social equity operators, which will probably be announced end of August 2020 through like September. The new cultivation licenses, September, October. But there's such a limited supply. You could be spending $20, $25, potentially $30 a gram on cannabis. It's pretty ridiculous when you think in Colorado you could get a pre-rolled joint for $4.50, like $4. So markets are changing. So I think Illinois is going to pop indeed. But markets that'll really explode into next year, I'm not a betting man, definitely an investor. But when I look at the key metrics of like the risk profile or what's the downside of a market like Arizona is going to be phenomenal for adult use cannabis starting in 2021. It does have to go through the vote, and mini little non-PSA service here, but like if you're an American, this is the most important year to vote in a long, long time. Not so much on a cannabis standpoint, but from other things. So make sure, be registered to vote. There's lots of local ballot initiatives in states for cannabis. And when you see quotes, this was from, I think, August 17th this year, that like Trump's talking to certain governors saying, don't allow cannabis to get on your ballots because it's going to bring out the hippies and the Democrats, and then they're also going to vote probably against you. So we're looking at that too. But when the president, impeached current president of the United States, is sending mandates to Republican entities saying, hey, cannabis is a reason a lot of Republicans are losing, definitely a good year to vote. Apathy is not a good year. I don't know if we want 4 more years of current policies, but be it whoever gets elected this year on a national basis, I still don't see major policy reform issues happening anytime soon in the United States. So that's why still these key new markets, like certain states based on qualifying condition for medical, the adult use sales, what they allow, how many there's going to be, now's the time to deploy capital into new markets to secure very limited license opportunities, which are extremely competitive, like bloodbath competitive, and just waiting until the law passes and then knowing the ordinances and the zoning, you're with the whole herd. Like now's the time, if you're in a state or a jurisdiction or you're thinking about expanding, really look, what's strategic, where can I make huge impact, and get ahead now. Because these things, when you're winning by 0.17 of a point, it's happened in multiple application markets where we've participated, like you've got one shot to do it well. I mean, that's why, at least on the 3C standpoint, we take applications so seriously, because there's a direct correlation with our success rate. The more time we work with someone and can strategize and have their local teams doing efforts and initiatives, the higher the success rate they have on like winning one of these licenses. So I'd say, like, to answer that question, like now more than ever, if you thought about getting into retail, start working for new licenses and even buying assets right now. There are many companies have limited, beautiful licenses in jurisdictions. They've been doing it for 3-4 years. They might be a little burned out. They might be into it. Their next capital raise didn't happen. They're not scaling. Mildly distressed assets, but with an extremely valuable thing, like a limited license in a city. a great location. Maybe they're having feuds. Just think mental health is not great right now for tons of, business executives and the world because there's no certainty. So if you can provide them some hope, some glimmering option on how to actually like make this business get better, it's an investor's paradise right now. But even on some of the, the most goldmine opportunities that I've found in this last 3 to 6 months, it's still challenging to get many investors to pull the trigger, even on things that are 2 to 3 to 4 times better than they were pre-pandemic, because there's that level of desperation from the capital markets kind of drying up for retail. But this side will always be a very productive, profitable sector of the industry. It does involve hands-on licensing, but even the investors investing into the real estate for these dispensaries, gold mine opportunities currently.
Great, thanks, Nic. Let's switch over to products now. I was watching a webinar the other day, and they said that about 80% of the products now are manufactured, and about 20% flower that are coming out of dispensaries and retail. What sort of product mixes are you seeing? And then what do you like as best sellers? If I was going to do a dispensary, assuming that all products were available in my state, what would I do? What product should I carry as the top sellers, and what should the mix be?
Each state's a little different, but with some of the data companies, I think if you're looking at Headset, Baker, Cannabis Benchmarks, looking at actually like what's selling, the pandemic did change consumer spending trends. I mean, one big thing, people buy more cannabis and cannabis products when they go to a store, period. Like basket size has definitely increased. When you look at actually like the amount of sales of like what categories, you think lung pandemic, smoking, vaping, those categories, like they dipped in the beginning, and you're right, more products are going to edibles. Beverages and edibles category is exploding and has been because it's a standardized experience. It's hard to go from like, I'm gonna smoke some strawberry cough and then some blueberry and then some G13, some wedding cake, some gelato. I'm like, ooh, space brownies, like new variety. I'm gonna try some space brownies. Compared to every time I buy this beverage with 10 milligrams of THC, or I take X amount of this, or eat this little piece of this chocolate bar, I have a standardized experience. And that's what you're selling to people at the end of the day. It's not the candy bar. It's not the brownie. It's not, the gummy block. So I think that during this time, we've definitely seen edible sales skyrocket. Beverage sales are radically increasing. Vapes have stayed mildly steady. Certain concentrate categories have been bumping up massively in some states, and flower sales have gone down. But even me, I love a good joint from time to time. But then it's easy when you can, in more normal times, like put a little bit of something in your coffee, or take this breath mint and go to work and like not have back pain or social anxiety or whatever it is that someone's using cannabis for, be it medicinal or adult use. We're seeing more of the standardized, consistent products take more market share. And I think some of the topicals, these other CBD products, each state's a little different when it comes to CBD and what you can produce with your medical cannabis or your adult use cannabis licenses and what else you can sell in your stores. But there was, everywhere you look, there's a CBD product, like CBD shampoo at Walmart or you name it. But I think that some of these more consistent topical applications, CBD products, are starting to get some more market share too. But we are seeing that it's not just about how high many consumers can get, but having a good, consistent experience, especially, not just catering to millennials or baby boomers, but more cannabis is happening, more cannabis sales and use is happening to larger demographics than we've seen in the past. And I think that if you can provide something to someone who's, experiencing a lot of turmoil based on this pandemic, that makes them be able to like be a little bit, I don't want to say medicated, but to not have to deal with things in the current reality, it's going to be huge opportunities for new categories and new products, especially those that are not the smokable product lines.
Great, thanks. Back to some operational items here in line with that, Nic. Let's talk inventory management challenges now. So, supply chains have been disrupted in a lot of industries, let alone cannabis, due to the pandemic. What are you seeing there now, and how should a dispensary or retail operator think about inventory, supply chain? How should they plan for the future based on what we're going through now?
It's a great question. Like right away in the beginning, we saw massive things like we can't open, we can't get masks for people, or we can't buy hand sanitizer fast enough. People are buying Everclear and mixing it with cornstarch and trying to make it was kind of chaos there in the beginning. Or plexiglass prices went up 400%. You're gotta make these little dividers, and no one had it. The main thing on supply chain that I see is the biggest problem in retail that was kind of a problem pre-pandemic that majorly turned into a problem during the pandemic was, if someone has a good experience and buys a good product and they come back next time and that's not on the shelf, you just lost a lifetime opportunity of a potential consumer. So really making sure that with supply contracts, with certain categories, edibles, certain lines, and this also gives certain continuity and consistency to the operators like the cultivators and manufacturers. But if you're a retail and you notice certain products, certain categories, being able to do pre-purchase from them, almost purchasing forwards or futures to guarantee supply contracts, it's a very wise idea to do now. There are remember, a lot of people are unemployed. Right after that, 420 this year was almost 100% better than it was last year. And that's one of our biggest retail sales days. But something that has changed majorly, and some states don't allow this. The ones that do, you kind of have to do it. But it's like California, paying for shelf space. I had clients, partners, paying $10,000, $20,000 a month just to be on the shelf of the dispensary or to have better placement. Same thing if you've ever gone to a grocery store, same shit, different day. And in cannabis retail, California and other markets, that was really important. When you're not open and you're just doing curbside or delivery or pre-order pickup or drive-through, do you still want to be spending $240,000 plus a year to be on a shelf that no one sees you on? So it changed how actually even some of these companies are marketing their products. Not just, being on Leafly and listed, but you've seen this new social engagement and digital age that was already, steady and consistent and growing in the retail space, but now is mandatory. It's kind of like if you don't have a website that's mobile friendly, you don't have a website kind of expression. And the same thing with many of these brands. So I think really getting into the consistency of if you've got good products, good product lines, guarantee their supply for your consumers. Price point has gotten much more important. You've always, some people are the craft cannabis, the connoisseurs, that's the big category. It's fucking not. People vote with their dollars, and if there's something that's $4 or something that's $13, why pay for Willie's Reserve or some celebrity brand if the flower's not as great as some of these other things and you're fucking unemployed and you're gotta pay rent, gotta pay food, gotta put food in the kids' mouths, gotta pay your bills, your electric bill's 4 times more than normal or whatever it might be. Price point is getting much more important. So I think the big thing that really retail operators need to know, as well as cultivators and manufacturers, volume over margin. If you can sell things a little bit cheaper, less margin per unit, but sell more volume of units, especially to get people with brand consistency now during this time, you're going to own that potential revenue for life and that customer for life. The things that have gotten better when it comes to packaging, cleaning supplies, or other things required for a dispensary, but most of the things that they should be looking to do, the main two, I'd say procuring digital space for a new marketing initiative, and then also guaranteeing certain product lines, certain consistency of operations, and really having lower price point options available for consumers, if and when possible. Illinois, even the cheapest stuff is still way expensive because there's such limited supply, so that if you're on that side of the supply chain, cultivation, manufacturing, analytical testing labs, double down now more than ever.
Makes perfect sense. Thanks, Nic. Has COVID created any staffing issues, Nic, or is there an abundance of staff available now? How are dispensaries and retail looking at that, and how should they look at it in the coming months?
Definitely saw a lot of staffing issues for the in-person operations. With a lot changing to remote at home, some workers just weren't used to that. And it's hard for a lot of people to adapt, or doing homeschooling and having fears of their family having this, taking care of, multi-generational households. Everyone's got something going on. So no matter if you're a business executive or an operator in a company, it's we have to deal with our mental health and our cultural kind of involvement of each other and be more patient, humble, and compassionate with your staff than you could ever imagine. Because right now, more than ever, trying to push people during these uber stressful times, if staff and people are worried about how they're putting food on the table or taking care of their families, It's like that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like food, water, shelter, fire first, and then these things and these things and these things. Like you got to make sure your staff have a stable base. We have also noticed like certain lawsuits, certain unionization, which unions are great, like to help our workers, that, you know, having to go to work and being exposed with some of these people with like compromised immune systems or some of these conditions that make them a lot more prone to death or delayed recovery with COVID. It has been challenging, but the labor pool you think 50 plus million people in the United States have become unemployed. There's a lot of new talent out there, and really searching for, this is something that would be a great opportunity for many operators if they can swing this, of really trying to find new management, new operators for their locations, not just the masses that are coming looking for work, but really seeking out the talent that you've been needing. And the biggest staff or like efficiency that's going to help here is like better POS systems, better marketing and branding platforms, better integration between the menu boards at the drive-through or behind the counter with online menu of like what products you have and don't have. There's nothing worse than like putting things in a cart, finding out they don't have that. So that's where I think there's a big opportunity to make things more efficient. I see operations though running with a third or half of their current staff and still doing the same amount of revenue because they don't have to spend as much time with that consumer experience now of like educating about cannabis. It's like people are not comfortable sometimes being in these locations for a long period of time. Someone coughs. I saw some security footage of like there was, you know, a person, everyone was masked, somebody started coughing, 3 clients just left. Like they were in the process of transactions. They're just like, I'm out. Like, so just knowing like this new normal, you're going to experience staffing issues, but like I said, really take care of your current staff. You have to do deep analysis as well, like which staff are performing, which ones are not, where to get more efficient, and find potentially some new talent.
Thanks, Nic. So last question for this episode. You know, some say we might be in this pandemic for 2 to 3 years. And you know, we don't know, depending upon what comes out with vaccines and other technologies to help. So maybe finish with, what does retail and dispensary need to do to be able to thrive, really compete and thrive over these next few years?
Sharpen your knives, tighten your belts. I mean, now's the time more than ever to make a stand. You know, if you're on the walls of the Alamo, you know, there's no stopping. And if you're in this industry and you've been in it long enough, I mean, I've done this for well over a decade, sharpen the knives, entrench, and get ready for like pretty much the most important time of your company's existence. You know, during these times, consumer mindsets are changing, regulations and policies are changing, consumer demands and shopping patterns, everything's changing. So if you don't change with that, if you stay completely static, you are dead. Like becoming dynamic as a business is vital, like very elastic and fluid because things are going to keep changing. I mean, this fall with colleges opening, colleges closing, I'm seeing locations in certain states like Pennsylvania where the medical license is like near certain universities, like majorly bumping up. But then some of those same universities, after being open a week, 2, or a month, are probably going to shut down. So people are staffing up quickly, and then all of a sudden, like sales plummet again. Like, what do you do? As an executive, an owner, or an investor, it's like making sure to have the flexibility to really change cash flows, change allocations, you know, make sure some of those contracts for like supply contracts I mentioned earlier, that they have certain outs just in case things do happen, because things are going to continue to happen. But this it's not, even if we come up with our magic cure tomorrow, like, oh, wow, ashwagandha, it cures everything, or something like, oh, perfect, eat some bee pollen or some new vaccine. There's one thing that's like more dangerous than this virus, and it's the fear. And that fear is what's really changing consumer patterns. It's changing how we're living, how we're traveling, how we're doing everything. And it takes a long time. Like, you get punched in the face, you know, by, you know, this little person you walk by every day. Well, every time you walk by them or you go outside, you're gonna be like, I'm gonna get punched in the face. It's gonna suck. It's gonna change how you live. And in that even when that person's gone, or that person moved away, like, you're still gonna have that deep internal memory of like fight or flight. And people have that right now. And it's gonna take years for that to really change. And just know for the future, some things will never come back. Like, some things will, but it's that fear we're going to be dealing with for the next half a decade to a decade, even with some sort of cure. And then the stories of this time that are going to change the forever landscape future of the cannabis industry. How we produce, how you take care of your workers, how we get our supplies, how legalization efforts are going to change. But it's a new curveball, and it's been like surfing this really rowdy wave for the last decade where things are constantly changing. There's a new market, or you could do this thing, then you can't. And all while this is federally illegal. There's always a risk factor with this, but the companies that can really evolve, stay fluid, stay flexible, will survive, take market share, and now more than ever, some of these single state operators, some of these groups, like people who used to be your competitors, they might very well have a great collaborative opportunity and actually become the same thing. So be looking for the M&As, like the mergers, acquisitions, be looking for the new opportunities in these markets. Don't just stagnate or think you're putting in these temporary changes that are gonna like go back to normal next month. Like if you were right by a giant stadium, like your sales might not increase to what they were pre-COVID for a long time. But entrenched, like I said, sharpen the knives, get ready. It's already been rowdy. Take care of your staff, take care of your people. Don't undermine what's going on, even if you don't believe in all of this or have any fears about what's happening. The world has changed and we have to change with it. And now more than ever, I see some of these opportunities being more valuable and easier to ascertain than they ever have been, but it's still a street fight. So sharpen the knives, grit your teeth, get in there, stay safe, take care of your people, and keep rocking it with Cannabis Unfiltered.
Thank you, Nic. Nic Easley, CEO of 3C and Managing Director of Multiverse Capital. This was Cannabis Unfiltered. See you next week.
Bye, everybody.